I gave my husband of 20 years permission to be free. The rules were simple, but the most important one was honesty. 100% honesty. And he agreed. Then he came home one night, smelling like different soap, and I found a charge for lace that wasn't for me. The ice in Ben's glass clinked. It was the loudest sound in the room for a second, a sharp little crack in the polite, curated hum of our dinner party. "I'm just saying," Ben said, his voice a little thick from Marcus's best Pinot Noir. 20 years with one person? It's a lot. Biologically, it's practically unnatural. His wife Priya gave him a sharp look. "Ben, please, don't be an ass." Across the sleek 8-foot slab of reclaimed wood that served as our dining table, I caught Marcus's eye. He gave me that smile. Private, confident, and just a little bit smug. The one that said, "Pour them." They're still stuck in the dark ages. They don't have what we have. I smiled back. We were a team. That was the performance. Ilara and Marcus, the evolved couple of Seattle. Our condo was all glass and steel, overlooking a city that was permanently damp and shining. The saffron risotto I'd spent 2 hours meticulously stirring was perfectly al dente. The minimalist playlist Marcus had curated, languid, vaguely European electronica, was perfectly unobtrusive. Everything in our life was perfect and hollow. The last guest finally left at 11, trailing compliments about the wine and the view. The heavy condo door snicked shut, and the silence rushed in, vast and immediate. It wasn't a comfortable silence. It was an absence. I started clearing plates. Marcus started wiping the quartz countertop. We moved around each other with the frictionless, silent efficiency of a high-end German dishwasher, the very one I was now using. "Good party," he said. "They seemed to have fun," I replied. We didn't talk about the kids. Ava at Stanford, Leo at Reesd. Their rooms were pristine, guest-ready, scrubbed of any lingering teenage life. We didn't talk about his work or my work. He was a tech consultant, riding a wave of success that had made us wealthy. I was an adjunct professor of art history at the university, a position he affectionately called "your little hobby." I was 48 years old. I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a COO. I managed our assets, our travel, our social calendar, and the quarterly maintenance on our impenetrable fortress of a home. We were a passionless partnership, and I was the one who felt the chill. I was the one who broke the silence a week later. It was a Tuesday. We were on the sofa, twin silver laptops glowing on our laps, the only light in the room. I closed my computer. The click was decisive. "Marcus? He was scrolling, his thumb moving in a steady, hypnotic rhythm. "We need to talk. We're stagnating. We're roommates, Marcus. We haven't connected in months, maybe years." He finally looked up. His face, still handsome at 50, softened into that familiar mask of concern. "Ilara, honey, we're busy. The kids are gone. This is just the next phase." "I don't want this phase," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. I had been researching. I'm an academic. It's what I do. I've been reading about this. About structural stagnation in long-term partnerships. He frowned, wary. "Reading what?" I laid it out. I used the language from the articles. Ethical non-monogamy. A structured openness. A way to re-energize the primary bond. I framed it as a solution. My solution. An intelligent, analytical, progressive fix for a problem that was emotional and messy. I gave him the rules I had so carefully drafted. 1, I said, holding up a finger. 100% honesty. About everyone. Every time. No omissions. 2, no emotional entanglements. These are diversions, not relationships. 3, no one from our immediate social or professional circles. No friends, no colleagues. And 4, I finished, the marriage always, always comes first. This is the priority. This is what we're trying to save. He looked wounded. It was a masterful performance. Ilara, I don't want anyone else. I only want you. Is that what you think? That I'm bored? It's not about wanting. I insisted, pushing past his reluctance. It's about growing. It's about bringing new energy back to us. It's the ultimate sign of trust, don't you see? That we're so secure we can do this. He was quiet for a long time, staring out at the city lights. Finally, he sighed and took my hand. His skin was warm. Okay, he said, his voice low. If you really think this is what we need. For us, okay? For us. It took him a month. He told me it was a work dinner that went late. He came home just after midnight. I was in our vast, quiet bed, pretending to read a treatise on Renaissance frescoes. The bedroom door opened. He didn't turn on the light. I heard him undressing in the dark. He got into bed, the mattress shifting. He smelled like different soap, faintly floral, and wine, not the Pinot we drank. He leaned over and kissed my forehead. His lips were cool. You were right, he whispered in the darkness. It was just a diversion. Honestly, he paused. It just made me realize how much I love coming home to you. A strange, cold knot formed in my stomach. I'd given him permission. I had drafted the proposal and gotten it signed. So why did it feel like a transgression? I told myself it was just the newness. I told myself this was the sound of our marriage being saved. I told myself to ignore the soap. For 3 weeks, the experiment was a success. On paper, Marcus was more attentive. He'd text me during the day, something he hadn't done in years, just to say, thinking of you. We had sex, and it felt new, less like a habit and more like a choice. He had one other date, a Thursday night. He came home smelling of whiskey and someone else's perfume. He told me her first name was Sarah, that she was a graphic designer he'd met at a lounge, and that it was fine. Just fine? I'd asked, propped up on one elbow in our dark bedroom. Just fine, he confirmed, slipping off his watch. Makes you appreciate what's real, you know? I felt a small proprietary thrill. It was working. I was modern. I was secure. I was in control. That's why I decided to book the trip. Our reconnection trip, as I'd framed it. A long weekend in the San Juans, just the two of us, to celebrate Rule No. 4, the marriage comes first. He'd loved the idea. Whatever you think is best, Alara, you always have the best ideas. So, on a gray Wednesday afternoon, I sat in our home office. The room was all brushed steel and glass, facing the perpetually gray Seattle sky. I had my laptop open, the airline's booking page glowing in front of me. I pulled up our shared credit card statement to confirm the airline voucher codes. I'm meticulous. I'm the one who reconciles the accounts, who tracks the investments, who catches the fraudulent $4.99 streaming service charge from Ohio. My eyes scanned the list of transactions. Whole Foods, $345.80, Shell Oil, $89.50, the Rive Gauche restaurant, $412. That was his dinner with Sarah, exactly where he said it would be. I felt a small ping of validation, honesty. Bordels, $2,000. I stopped. My mouse hovered over the line, Bordels. I knew the name. It was a high-end, obscenely expensive lingerie boutique downtown, the kind with armored glass and displays that looked more like art installations, the kind that sold things with intricate straps and French lace that cost more than my monthly car payment. It was absolutely, unequivocally not my style. I favored simple, elegant silk chemises. Practical, $2,000. My first thought was a logical query. A surprise for me? But our anniversary was months away. My birthday had just passed, and the charge date, it was from 2 weeks ago. The day after his fine date with Sarah, I looked at the charge again. $2,000. It wasn't a typo. The pit in my stomach, the one I'd felt that first night, returned. It was no longer a vague knot of anxiety. It was a cold, dense stone. I said nothing. I booked the flights to Friday Harbor. I confirmed the waterfront hotel. I went to the university, taught my seminar on the Dutch masters, and listened to a 20-year-old explain how Vermeer used light to imply domestic divinity. I smiled, I nodded, I graded his paper in my head. That night, I was the one making dinner. We were in the kitchen, The sound of my knife hitting the wooden cutting board was a steady, rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack as I minced garlic. The air smelled sharp and green. Marcus was leaning against the counter, swirling a glass of Cabernet, telling me about a chaotic meeting. His suit jacket was off, his tie loosened. He looked relaxed, domestic, safe. "I booked the San Juan's trip," I said, not looking up from the garlic. "That's great, honey. I can't wait. I was just going over the credit card statement while I was booking." I scooped the garlic into a small bowl, my movements economical and precise. "I saw a charge I didn't recognize. Bordels? For $2,000. I finally looked at him. He didn't flinch. He didn't stutter. He didn't look away, or up at the ceiling, or do any of the things a guilty person does. He laughed. It was a full, easy laugh, as if I'd just told a mildly amusing joke. "Oh, got that," he said, taking a sip of his wine. "You saw that? Ridiculous, isn't it?" I waited. My hand was steady on the knife. "It was a stupid gag joke," he explained, shaking his head. "For Kenji in accounting. It's his bachelor party this weekend. You know, one of those ridiculous last night of freedom things. All the guys pitched in. I just put it on my card because I had the highest limit. They're all paying me back on Venmo. It was just stupid, tacky, honestly." He smiled at me. That same confident, loving smile from the dinner party. He said it without blinking. He held my gaze. He lied. He stood in our kitchen, in the life I managed, in the marriage I was trying to save, and he lied. Directly to my face. It wasn't the lie of omission I had braced myself for. This was a fabrication, complete, detailed, and delivered with the effortless ease of a man ordering coffee. I had given him permission to have sex with other women. I had opened our marriage analytically, progressively, trusting in the one rule that mattered more than fidelity. Rule number 1, 100% honesty. He hadn't just broken it. He'd melted it down and recast it as a weapon. The freedom wasn't the issue. The lie was, and as I looked at my husband of 20 years, I realized with a sudden, sickening clarity, he was very, very good at it. "Ah," I said. I turned back to the cutting board. "That makes sense. Silly. Totally silly," he agreed, taking another drink. The smell of the garlic was suddenly overwhelming, bitter and sharp. The sound of the knife started again, but now it felt different. It felt colder. The weekend in the San Juans was beautiful, and a lie. We took the ferry, the salt spray misting the windows of Marcus's black Tesla. We stood on the deck, the wind whipping my hair across my face. The air was so cold it stung, but the sky was a brilliant metallic blue. Marcus put his arm around my shoulder and pulled me close. "This was a great idea, Alara," he said, his voice warm against my ear. "Just what we needed." I leaned into him. His jacket smelled like wool and his familiar, expensive cologne. I said, "The air is so clean up here." We ate briny, ice-cold oysters at a waterfront restaurant. We hiked a trail through damp pine trees that smelled like Christmas and decay. We sat by a fireplace in the expensive, rustic modern hotel I'd booked. He read his thriller. I read my art journal. The entire time, a single image was projected in my mind. Kenji's bachelor party. $2,000. Tacky, honestly. It was a performance. I, who had spent my life analyzing the hidden meanings in brushstrokes and pigment, was now living inside a terribly painted forgery. I was brittle, polite. I smiled. I laughed at his jokes. He was attentive, charming. He was the perfect, reconnected husband. He had no idea I knew. Or rather, he had no idea I knew he was lying. He thought his performance had worked. We returned to the city on Sunday night, the Seattle skyline glittering like a circuit board against the dark water. We drove home in comfortable silence. He went to bed early. "Big week," he said, kissing my temple. I waited. I waited until I heard the faint, telltale sniff of a CPAP machine turning on, followed by its low, rhythmic hiss. He was asleep. I went to our home office. The room was cold. I didn't turn on the overhead lights, just the small, green-shaded banker's lamp on the glass desk. I sat in my high-backed leather chair. The lie was a loose thread. I was going to pull it. They're all paying me back on Venmo, he'd said. I opened my laptop. The glow was bright in the dark room. I managed all our accounts. I had set them up 15 years ago. I knew every password, every security question. What was the name of your first pet? Buster. What is your mother's maiden name? Leduc guy logged into his Venmo account. My fingers were steady on the keyboard. I scrolled through his transaction history. Back past the date of the bordel's charge, Fantasy Football League dues, $100. Sam S. Lunch. 45s, Priya, wine, 60, Leo, books. 200 on. I scrolled and scrolled. A month back, 2 months. There was no Kenji. There were no incoming payments for $200 or $300 or any fraction of $2,000. There was no bachelor party pool. The lie was confirmed. The $2,000 was his and hers. A strange, cold calm settled over me. This wasn't the hot, messy panic of jealousy. This was the icy clarity of a research problem. I had been played for a fool. My intelligence had been insulted. My proposal, my rules, my evolved solution, he had taken my own intellectual vanity and used it as a cover story. I closed Venmo. If he lied about the money, he lied about Sarah. He had lied about Fine. I opened the shared credit card account again. This time, I wasn't just checking a single charge. I was auditing. I set the date range for the last 90 days. I exported the data to a spreadsheet. Ilara, adjunct professor, COO of Marcus Inc., began to cross-reference. I highlighted every charge that wasn't a recurring bill. A grocery run or his known work lunches. The Rive Gauche, $412, the one he told me about. The Sarah date, L'Auberge, $380, a week before Sarah. A tiny, intimate French place in Fremont. We never went to Fremont. It was too trendy, too young. The Criterion Hotel, $1,150. My breath hitched. The Criterion wasn't near the airport. It wasn't a business hotel. It was a 5-star boutique hotel a mile from our condo. The charge was for a Saturday night. A Saturday I had spent at the university library, grading midterms. Uber, $28.50. Uber, $31. Uber, 29 hours. A pattern. Dozens of Uber trips. Not to his office. Not to the airport. They all went to the same general address. A drop-off pin in a dense residential block of Capitol Hill. I looked at the spreadsheet. The columns neat and unforgiving. This wasn't a series of diversions. This wasn't a man clumsily scratching an itch. This was a parallel life. The expensive dinners. The 5-star hotel room in his own city. The $2,000 worth of lingerie. This was an affair. A classic, grubby textbook affair, gift-wrapped in the progressive intellectual language I had provided him. He wasn't just breaking the rules. He was using them as a shield. My hands were shaking, not with rage, but with a cold, vibrating energy. Who was she? Not Sarah. Sarah was a ghost, a convenient single-syllable name to satisfy Rule More One. Who was she? The Ubers went to an apartment building. A dead end? I couldn't get a name from that. I went back to Venmo. I had only looked at the incoming payments. I had only been looking to disprove the Kenji lie. I switched the filter. Outgoing. I scrolled. Fantasy football, lunch, Priya, Leo, and then I saw it, a recurring payment. Once a month. $750. The name was Chloe M. The memo line was always one word. Utility. Dinner. Share. My heart didn't pound. It just stopped. It was a cold, hard stone in my chest. Chloe, I opened a new tab in my browser. My fingers flew. Google, Chloe M. Seattle. Thousands of results. Useless. I stopped. I closed my eyes. I pictured Marcus. His easy laugh. His confidence. His smug smile at the dinner party. Rule number 3. No one from our immediate social or professional circles. A wave of nausea so profound washed over me that I grabbed the edge of the glass desk. My knuckles were white. No, I whispered to the empty, silent room. I opened LinkedIn. The professional's hunting ground. I typed Marcus's name into the search bar. I went to his company's page. I clicked on employees. I typed Chloe into the employee search filter. One result, Chloe Martin. Junior analyst. I clicked. Her profile picture was bright and professional. She was young, so young. 29, her profile said. She was smiling, her head tilted, wearing a black blazer. She looked ambitious, polished, and happy. Around her neck was a delicate, gold link necklace I had never seen before. He hadn't just broken rule number 1, he had broken rule number 3. He wasn't just having an affair. He was having it with a subordinate, a 29-year-old analyst at his own firm. The entire evolved experiment, the trust I had so arrogantly claimed we possessed, was a comprehensive, calculated, and humiliating fraud. He had made me the architect of my own betrayal. I sat there, in the cold blue light of the monitor, staring at her face. Chloe Martin, 29. Her smile was easy, genuine. She looked like the kind of woman who color-coded her calendar and still had time for weekend brunch. Around her neck, the delicate gold necklace. My eyes zoomed in. It wasn't just a necklace. It was a single, tiny, horizontally set emerald. My stomach lurched. I felt the bile rise, hot and acidic. I had seen that necklace before. I had seen it in an open browser tab on Marcus's laptop a month ago, on a high-end jewelry site. I had assumed, with a pathetic flicker of hope I hadn't even admitted to myself, that he was researching a gift for me. He wasn't researching. He was buying. He had bought his mistress a $1,500 necklace and then lied about $2,000 worth of lingerie for a non-existent bachelor party. He wasn't just sloppy. He was contemptuous. He didn't even care enough to cover his tracks. Why would he? His emotionally evolved wife had given him a hall pass. The coldness in my chest was absolute now. It was a physical sensation, like I'd swallowed a block of ice. I wasn't grieving, I was activated. I needed to see the shape of it, the full, three-dimensional model of his betrayal. I left the office and walked padded foot down the dark hallway to the living room. The glass walls showed me a million pinpricks of light from the city below, a reflection of my own shattered, glittering rage. There, on the marble charging stand, was the house iPad. We used it for recipes, for controlling the Sonos, for checking the weather. It was logged into the family Apple ID, and Marcus, in his profound arrogance, had never bothered to unsync his iMessage. He probably forgot it was even an option. He used his phone for everything, and he thought I was too busy with my little hobby to ever look. I picked it up. The metal was cold in my hands. I unlocked it. My thumbprint. My access. I tapped the green message icon. The list of conversations loaded. His blue bubbles, they're gray. And there she was. Chloe M. The thread was pinned to the top. I opened it. It wasn't just sexting. It was domestic. It was a constant running dialogue that tracked the banality of a real relationship. Chloe. Running late. Grabbing coffee? Want one? Marcus. Yes, the usual. Chloe. You're a menace. Marcus. Just close the deal. We're celebrating tonight. The auberge. Chloe. Can't wait. Wearing the green dress l'auberge. The $380 dinner from before my open marriage pitch. My fingers started to tremble. I scrolled. Up, past my proposal. Past the dinner party. I scrolled back 1 month, 2, 3. The affair wasn't a product of our agreement. It had started in August. He hadn't reluctantly agreed to my modern solution. He had seen an opportunity. He had seen a chance to legitimize his affair, to launder his guilt, and to make me his willing, progressive alibi. The whole reluctance was a performance. The whole, it made me realize how much I love coming home to you, was a script. I scrolled down, my breath shallow. I was looking for something specific. I was looking for me. I found us. Chloe, I'm struggling with this, Marcus. Are you sure she's okay with it? This whole open thing. It feels weird. I feel like the other woman. My pulse was a dull thud in my ears. I waited for his reply. Marcus, babe, listen to me. I told you. We're in the process of a quiet separation. It's just complicated. The kids are just out of the house. She's emotionally fragile. Emotionally fragile. Marcus. This whole open marriage thing was her idea. A last-ditch attempt to feel modern. I'm just playing along until the financials are settled. I have to handle her delicately. She's not as strong as you are. The iPad screen went black. I had been staring so long it had gone to sleep. I saw my own reflection in the dark glass. My face was a pale, blank mask. Fragile me, Ilara. The one who ran our homes, our finances, our children's lives. The one who had built the scaffolding that held his entire impressive life aloft. I was emotionally fragile. That was the moment, the midpoint, the precise, crystalline second that the last molecule of grief in my body underwent a chemical change, sublimating from a liquid to a solid. It turned to ice. It turned to steel. I was not a wife. I was not a partner. I was a problem to be handled. And he, Marcus, was not just an adulterer. He was a narcissist who had weaponized my own intelligence against me. He had made me the gatekeeper of my own humiliation. I stood up. I placed the iPad back on its charger, wiping the glass clean of my fingerprints with the hem of my silk robe. I walked back to the home office. I sat down at the glass desk. My marriage was a fraud. My modern experiment was a fraud. What else? A man who lies this completely, this fundamentally, he doesn't just do it in one part of his life. He doesn't have the creative energy for that kind of compartmentalization. He's just a liar. His work, his brilliant consulting career, his persona as the charismatic tech guru. My gaze drifted from my laptop to the brushed steel tower in the corner. His personal server, his brain, he called it. It held all his private client work, his personal projects, his backups. It was separate from the family cloud. It was his fortress. It was protected by a single password. He had set it up years ago when he was still just a consultant and not a partner. I'd been sitting right here, in this chair, paying the bills online. What's the password? I'd asked, not looking up. In case you're on a plane and a client calls, or in case, you know. You'll never guess it, Ilara, he'd said, his voice full of that smug, teasing affection I used to find so charming. It's too clever, I'd sighed, my fingers stopping on the keyboard. I'd looked at him. At this man I thought I knew better than anyone. It's Buster, I said. His smile had frozen. How did you... It's the name of the dog you had before you met me. The one you still call the best friend I ever had. It's the most obvious, sentimental, and predictable password you could possibly choose. He'd been genuinely annoyed. Well, don't tell anyone. I'm not anyone, I'd said. I'm your wife. I turned my chair to face the server. I woke the monitor. The login screen glowed. Marcus server. Enter passphrase. My fingers, no longer shaking, moved to the keyboard. I typed the 6 letters BUSTERI, pressed enter. The screen flickered. A blue progress bar loaded, and then, in clean sans serif font, access granted. Welcome, MI was in. The server files were organized. Of course they were. Marcus's entire life was a monument to curated organization. From his sock drawer to his investment portfolio, folders were labeled with stark, clean names. Clients, active, clients, archived, financials, personal. I sat there, the sole green lamp painting a pool of light on the glass desk. The rest of the condo was silent, save for the rhythmic, mechanical breathing of my husband down the hall. My first instinct was to search for Chloe. I ran a search. The results were professional, sterile, memos she was copied on, project timelines that listed her as a junior team member. Nothing incriminating, just the digital footprint of an analyst at a large firm. Of course. He wasn't stupid. He was just arrogant. He wouldn't hide his secrets under her name. He'd hide them under his. He'd file his crimes under work. I navigated to the client's active folder. I knew his main client, the one that paid for this condo, the cars, the kids' tuition. Aperture Solutions. a data security behemoth. His consulting fee alone was obscene. I opened the folder. It was vast, subfolders on subfolders, audits, compliance reports, Q44 projections. I opened another folder, one I'd seen before but never paid attention to. Project Lighthouse. It was a name I'd heard him say on phone calls. "Just wrapping up a call for Lighthouse," he'd yell from his study. A little boutique startup. Fascinating stuff. I clicked it. It wasn't a client file. It was a company file in corporation documents, filed in Delaware. Funding round proposals, business plans, Lighthouse Analytics, a boutique startup, just as he'd said. I read the mission statement, specializing in predictive market strategy for the data security sector. My blood went cold. The data security sector, Aperture's exact industry. This wasn't a client. This was a side hustle. A very, very sophisticated side hustle. I opened two windows, side by side. On the left, Aperture Q4 projections. On the right, Lighthouse strategic moves. I started cross-referencing dates. On September 8th, Aperture's internal audit team flagged a significant vulnerability in their cloud infrastructure. The report was confidential, circulated only to the board and key consultants. Marcus was on the list. On September 12th, Aperture's stock dipped slightly on unrelated news. On September 13th, Lighthouse Analytics executed a complex series of trades, shorting a direct competitor of Aperture's that relied on the same vulnerable infrastructure. On October 1st, the vulnerability became public. The competitor's stock collapsed. Aperture's held steady. Lighthouse, I saw from a separate P&L statement, cleared a profit of $1.8 million. My heart was no longer a dull thud. It was a hummingbird, a frantic, vibrating thing in my chest. I kept digging. In August, Aperture had secretly begun R&D on a new encryption protocol. The internal code name was Project Argus. 2 weeks later, Lighthouse Analytics filed a patent for a novel encryption framework that was functionally identical. This wasn't predictive strategy. This was theft. This was insider trading. This was corporate fraud on a scale that made my head swim. He was using his top-tier confidential access at Aperture to systematically strip mine their intellectual property and market data. He was feeding it all to his little boutique startup. He wasn't just a tech consultant. He was a corporate criminal. And the affair, the lies, Chloe, it all clicked into place with the terrible, satisfying snap of a puzzle's final piece. The affair wasn't a distraction from his work. It was a part of it. I needed to be sure. I went back to the Lighthouse legal folder. I found the incorporation documents again. I scrolled past the boilerplate, down to the list of partners, founder and CEO, Marcus Thorne. Partner. Redacted, private equity holding a holding company. Smart, anonymous. I searched the server for the holding company's name. I found the master agreement. I opened the PDF, and there it was, the signature page. The list of investors in the holding company: Marcus Thorne, 50% ownership. Chloe Martin, 50% ownership. I stopped breathing. The $2,000 lingerie. The emotionally fragile texts. The secret apartment. It wasn't just an affair. It was a partnership. He hadn't just lied to me about sex. He was building a new life with her, a new company, funded by a massive corporate crime. He was going to drain Aperture, build Lighthouse into a titan, and then... what? Leave his emotionally fragile wife, who had so conveniently provided him with the open marriage cover story for the entire transition. He wasn't just leaving me. He was plundering me. Plundering the life I had built. I sat back in the chair. The green light of the banker's lamp illuminated the dusk motes dancing in the cold air. I had it. I had all of it. The lingerie receipt, the texts, the wire transfers, and now this, the checkmate. I copied the Lighthouse folder and the key Aperture reports onto a small, encrypted USB drive I kept in my desk drawer. I slid the drive into my pocket. It felt heavy, like a stone. I was closing the server window when I heard it. The hiss click, the silence of the CPAP machine, stopping. The condo was plunged into a new, more absolute quiet. I froze. I heard the mattress creak in the bedroom. Footsteps, soft on the hardwood floor. Coming this way. The office door swung open. Marcus stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. His hair was mussed from sleep. He was wearing the silk pajamas I'd bought him for Christmas. His face, usually so confident, was a mask of practiced, deep concern. "Alara?" he said, his voice thick with sleep and feigned worry. "It's 3 a.m. What are you doing up?" He walked into the room, squinting at the green lamp. "You've been so distant," he said, perching on the edge of the glass desk, reaching for my hand. "Ever since the San Juans, I've been worried." My hand was resting on the desk, inches from the laptop. I didn't move. He laced his fingers through mine. His skin was warm. "This whole freedom thing," he said, his voice a low, concerned murmur. "It was your idea, Alara. I told you I was worried. I told you I was worried it would make us drift." He squeezed my hand. Are you regretting it? Is that what this is? You can tell me. You know you can tell me anything. I just want us to be okay." I looked at our joined hands, his so warm and strong covering mine. This hand that had typed the texts, signed the fraudulent papers, bought the lingerie. He was gaslighting me, using my idea, my emotional fragility, as the reason for my distance. I felt a sudden hysterical urge to laugh. It bubbled in my throat, hot and sharp. I took a slow breath. I pictured the files on the USB drive in my pocket. I pictured Chloe's signature. I pictured the word fragile. I looked up at him. I pulled my hand gently from his. I manufactured the most tired, broken smile I could. "You're right," I whispered. "You're right, I'm just confused. I think I'm regretting it." His face flooded with relief. He had his answer. He had his leverage. "We just need to talk," I said, my voice trembling just enough. "A real talk, but not now. It's too late." I stood up, and he stood with me, pulling me into a hug. I let my head rest on his chest. I could feel his heart beating steady and strong, the heart of a liar. "Tomorrow," I whispered into his pajama silk. "Let's clear the air. I'll make dinner. A proper dinner, just us. We'll talk about everything." He kissed the top of my head. "That's my girl," he said, his voice full of warmth. "See? We just need to communicate. It's all going to be fine." He let me go and padded back to the bedroom, back to his sleep. Secure in the knowledge that his fragile wife was just having a predictable, manageable crisis, I stood in the dark office for a long time. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "It's not." I spent the day executing a series of quiet, precise digital transfers. I moved assets, created new accounts, and routed data. It was the same work I had always done as the COO of our household. But this time, I was liquidating. By 4 o'clock, my half of our life was secured, firewalled, and invisible. At 5, I began to cook. I poached a whole salmon. I did it perfectly, immersing it in a court bouillon of white wine, lemon, and dill, bringing it to a bare simmer, and then killing the heat. I let it cool in its own fragrant liquid for an hour. The rest was an assembly of cold, beautiful things. A salad of shaved fennel and bitter radicchio, a bowl of tiny, gleaming black lentils, a cucumber and yogurt sauce. I set our 8-foot wooden table with our best linen placemats, the heavy silver, and the thin-stemmed crystal glasses. There was no music. The silence of the condo was vast and absolute. I was plating the salmon, arranging thin slices of cucumber on the pale pink flesh like scales, when I heard his key in the door. "Alara? Honey?" His voice echoed slightly in the minimalist foyer. "In the kitchen," I called out. He walked in, dropping his briefcase by the counter. He was smiling, but his eyes were wary. He was a man walking into a room he suspected might be mined. He saw the table, the wine breathing in a decanter, the artful plates. His shoulders dropped in visible relief. This was a scene he understood. This was his fragile wife, overcompensating, trying to fix things with a nice dinner. He thought he was about to receive a tearful apology. "Wow," he said, loosening his tie. This is incredible. You didn't have to do all this. I told you we just needed to talk. I wanted to, I said. Sit down, Marcus. He sat. I poured the wine, a Sancerre, pale and sharp as glass. I sat opposite him. The table felt as wide as a river. The city lights glittered behind him, cold and impersonal. He raised his glass. To us. To figuring it out. I raised mine. I did not repeat the toast. I drank. The wine was acidic, clean. He took a bite of the salmon. Elara, it's perfect. He dabbed his mouth with the linen napkin. So, he said, leaning forward, his voice shifting into that low, concerned, handling me tone. You were right. Last night was weird. I've been so worried. I just want us to get back on track. I set my fork down. The tink of the silver against the ceramic plate was the only sound. I gave you freedom, Marcus, I said. My voice was calm. Not a whisper, not a shout. Just a statement of fact, delivered into the quiet air. He flinched just slightly. His mask of concern tightened. Elara, honey, what are you? I gave you the freedom to explore, I continued, to bring new energy back into this marriage. I gave you rules, and I gave you my trust. But you didn't want freedom. You wanted a fool. He put his fork down. The performance began. He looked wounded, confused. It was a master class. Elara. What? What is that supposed to mean? That's not fair. That's not true. I thought we were going to talk. You're the one who's been so cold, so distant. I've been worried sick about us. You lied, I said. To my face, in this kitchen, about the $2,000 charge from Bordel's. His face, which had been a mask of soft concern, hardened. Annoyance flickered in his eyes. He was angry that I wasn't following his script. Oh my God, he said, scoffing. This again? The bachelor party? I told you, it was a stupid, tacky gag gift. Jesus, Elara, what has gotten into you? He was getting louder now, using indignation as a shield. This open thing has made you paranoid. Is that it? You're checking my receipts now? You're spying on me? Yes, I said. The word hung in the air between us. Simple, undeniable. He was stunned. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He had expected tears, accusations of infidelity. He had not expected an audit. Wow, he breathed, sitting back. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a sharp huff of air. Wow. Okay, so my wife, the evolved one, is spying on me. After she was the one who pushed this whole thing. That's rich, Elara. He leaned forward again, his voice dropping, trying a new tactic. Anger hadn't worked, so now, disappointment. What else did you find, huh? That I bought lunch for Sam? That I took an Uber? He was still trying to gaslight me, to paint me as the obsessive, paranoid wife. He thought this was about jealousy. He thought this was just about the sex. I had to give him credit. He was committed to the lie. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, Elara, if this is about Chloe... My heart didn't leap. It just stopped. There it was. He said her name. It meant nothing, he said, pushing on, his voice desperate and earnest. It was just a diversion, a mistake. It's exactly what we agreed to. A diversion. No emotions, no strings. You are blowing this completely out of proportion. I ended it. It's done. He sat back, breathing heavily, as if he'd just completed a marathon. He had confessed. He had admitted to the affair, but he'd framed it within my rules. He'd categorized it as a diversion, a simple rule break he could apologize for. He thought he'd just handed me the win I was looking for. He thought the fight was over. I watched him. His chest was puffed with the righteousness of his confession. He was waiting for my tears, for my anger, for the messy, emotionally fragile breakdown he had been steeling himself for. I picked up my wine glass. I took a slow, deliberate sip. I met his impatient, anxious gaze over the rim. I set the glass down. I'm not talking about Chloe, I said. Marcus's face was a study in confusion. He had just laid his affair on the table, gift-wrapped it as a minor transgression, and I had refused to pick it up. What? He stammered. If not Chloe, then what are you? What else is there? He genuinely didn't know. He thought the affair was the thing in itself, the beginning and the end of his betrayal. He had no idea it was just a symptom. I reached down to the empty chair beside me where my leather satchel rested. I pulled out a single plain manila folder. It was thin, holding only 4 pieces of paper. I placed it on the polished wood between my plate and his. The sound was a soft, definitive thud. "You're right," I said. "You did break our rules. You lied about the sex. You lied about her being a colleague. You lied about being reluctant. But that was just sloppy, unimaginative." "Sloppy?" he repeated, his voice rising in disbelief. "I'm trying to be honest with you, Alara. I'm admitting it." "No," I said. I pushed the folder. It slid across the smooth table, a dry, scratching sound that cut through the silence. It stopped just short of his wine glass. "I'm talking about this." He looked at the folder as if it were a snake. "Go on," I said. "Open it." He stared at me, his jaw working. Then, with a quick, irritated motion, he flipped open the cover. The first page on top was a high-resolution color printout. The logo for Bordels was at the top, in elegant, swirling script. Below, the itemized list was descriptive. The total at the bottom, $2,000. He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "For Christ's sake, Alara, we've been over this. It was a gag gift. How many times—" "Keep reading," I said. He glared at me, then snatched the receipt off. His eyes fell on the second page. It was the screenshot from the iPad. His iMessage thread with Chloe M. I had highlighted the relevant bubbles in yellow. His own words, blue and damning, in the process of a quiet separation. "She's emotionally fragile. I have to handle her delicately." The color began to drain from his face. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. This wasn't annoyance anymore. This was a new dawning horror. He hadn't just been caught in an affair. He'd been caught in his contempt for me. "Fragile," I said, my voice quiet. I let the word hang in the air between us. He fumbled for the next page. His hands were shaking. He was still trying to process the humiliation, still thinking this was a domestic battle he could somehow win, or at least survive. The third page wasn't a screenshot. It was a spreadsheet, my own creation. A clean, simple 2-column summary. On the left, dates. On the right, wire transfers. June 10th, Marcus Thorne. LH Holdings, LLC, $50,000. July 1st, Marcus Thorne. Latza Holdings, LLC. $100,000 August 14, Latza Holdings, LLC. Chloe Martin. $75,000. Signing bonus. He stared at the letters. "Litzy. Lighthouse. What is this?" This is my private work. You've been on my server?" The accusation was breathless, incredulous. "Buster," I said. "It was always Buster." "You were right. It was a sentimental, predictable password." "This is illegal," he hissed, his voice a low, strangled thing. He was trying to regain control, to go on the offensive. "You can't. This is proprietary data." "You don't know what you're looking at, Alara." "This is my business." "One more page, Marcus." He looked at the last sheet of paper still in the folder. He didn't want to pick it up. His hand hovered over it. Finally, he snatched it. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It wasn't a text. It was a single forwarded email, printed in stark black and white. From Marcus.Thorne@ApertureSol.com to mthornelighthouse.analytics.com. Date, August 29th. Subject, Project, Argus, notes below. The header was a direct 20-page copy and paste of Aperture Solutions' most confidential R&D, their new, unpatented encryption protocol. The one that was going to define their next decade. He didn't just go pale. He went gray, a waxy greenish gray, the color of old fish, of decay. He dropped the email as if it had burned him. It fluttered to the table, landing on his plate of cold, untouched salmon. He finally understood. This wasn't a domestic dispute. This wasn't a fight about a broken rule in our silly, evolved marriage. This wasn't about sex or hurt feelings. He wasn't just facing a messy, expensive divorce. He was facing corporate fraud, insider trading. He was facing the SEC, the board of Aperture Solutions and Federal Prison. He was facing total, abject, financial and professional ruin. The entire brilliant career he had built, the one that made him smug and powerful, was a house of cards. And I was holding the match. He tried to take a sip of wine. His hand was trembling so violently he couldn't get the glass to his lips. He slammed it down, splashing the pale Sancerre across the white linen. He looked up at me. The smugness was gone. The charm, the pity, the anger, all of it gone. All that was left was the raw, animal terror of a man in a trap. He opened his mouth. A dry, clicking sound came out. "Now," I said, my voice perfectly level in the quiet room. "We can talk." Marcus stared at the email, the one sitting on his salmon. The ink was stark against the white paper and the pale pink flesh. "Ilara," he whispered. His voice was a dry rattle. He wasn't talking to me. He was pleading to a concept, to a past that had just been vaporized. "Ilara, please, you can't. This will destroy us." "There is no us, Marcus," I said. I folded my hands on the table. My pulse was even. "There is only me. And there are the consequences of your choices." "But prison?" His voice cracked. You would send your husband, the father of your children, to prison?" "No," I said. "You would. I'm just offering you the alternative." "A negotiation," he said, seizing the word. Okay, we can figure this out. What do you want? Half? Half of Lighthouse? It's worth a lot. It's worth millions. You'd be rich. Richer than... "This is not a negotiation," I said, cutting him off with the flat, cold precision of a surgeon's blade. "This is your exit package." I leaned forward. "First, I am keeping this condo. I am keeping the brokerage accounts, the bonds, and our liquid assets. They are, as of 4 p.m. today, already in a new trust account in my name only." His head snapped up. "You can't do that. That's illegal." "No, it's just efficient," I said. "As the manager of this family's finances, I moved our joint assets to protect them. You as a partner can contest it, but you won't, because of the folder. Second, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we are going to my lawyer's office. Not our lawyer, Marcus, my lawyer. You will be meeting him for the first time." I paused, letting that sink in. "There," I continued, "you will sign 2 documents. The first is a divorce settlement. It will be amicable. It will cite irreconcilable differences. We simply evolved apart." I used our old smug phrase, and I saw him wince. "The second document," I said, "is a full, detailed, notarized confession. Everything. The intellectual property theft from Aperture. The timeline of Project Lighthouse. The insider trading. Chloe Martin's role as a silent partner. All of it. Everything in that folder. And more." He was shaking his head, a mute, desperate gesture. "Ilara, no. That confession," I said, "is my insurance policy. It will be sealed and held in trust by my lawyer. You will also agree to pay alimony, significant alimony, the kind of alimony that befits the lifestyle of your emotionally fragile wife. And if you are ever one day late, if you ever try to challenge this settlement, if a single anonymous email about my paranoia lands in my university inbox, that confession will be hand-delivered to the SEC and the entire Aperture Solutions Board of Directors." He made a small, choking sound. "And third," I finished, "you will walk away. You will take your car. You will take your clothes. You will take Chloe, and you will take your criminal enterprise. You get to keep your secret. You get to keep being the brilliant tech genius. But you will pay for it." For the rest of your life, I sat back. I had said it all. He stared at the table, at the wreckage of his dinner. He was trying to find an angle. I could see his mind racing, searching for a foothold, a new lie, a new performance. "Ilara," he whispered, looking up at me. His eyes were wet. The tears were real this time, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of pure, narcissistic terror. "You don't want to do this. This isn't you. You're a good person. You're not this cold." He was trying one last time, appealing to the fragile woman he thought he knew. I almost smiled. "You were right about one thing, Marcus," I said. my voice soft. I was emotionally fragile, but you cured me of that. That was it. That was the moment he broke. It wasn't a snap. It was a deflation. The arrogance that had held him upright for 50 years evaporated. The charm, the smugness, the charisma, it all just leaked out of him, leaving a gray, hollow shell of a man staring at a piece of paper on a cold plate of fish. He looked old. He looked, for the first time, like a fool. "Okay," he whispered. He didn't look at me. He looked at the window, at the city lights. Okay. He was gone by morning. Months later, I was sitting on my sofa. It wasn't his sofa. His sleek, gray, minimalist, everything was gone. I had sold the 8-foot table. I had sold the steel and glass chairs. I had ripped out the cold quartz counters. The condo was mine now. I had filled it with deep velvet-covered furniture in shades of plum and olive. The walls, once gallery white, were now a warm, textured cream. My books, hundreds of them, overflowed from new floor-to-ceiling wooden shelves. The art on the walls was vibrant, emotional, chaotic. It smelled like beeswax and old paper and the lemon oil I used on the wood. It was my space. I was curled on the sofa, a cashmere throw over my legs, reading a new biography of Artemisia Gentileschi. A glass of wine was on the coaster beside me, a deep, complex Barolo, a bottle I had bought, with my money, to celebrate the end of my academic quarter. My phone, resting on the velvet cushion, buzzed. I picked it up. A notification from my bank. Transfer received $12,500 from Lighthouse Analytics, LLC. I looked at the notification for a long moment. He had to pay me directly from the company. It was part of the settlement, a monthly grinding reminder to both him and his new partner, his 29-year-old silent partner, of who exactly was in charge. I had given him freedom, and he had given me a lie. I had taken his lie, and I had bought my own. A small, bitter, but deeply satisfied smile crossed my face. I locked my phone and set it down. I picked up my wine. I took a sip. It was rich and complex and perfect. I was finally truly free.